The rain drummed against the ancient stone walls of the Neural Archive like ghostly fingers, each drop a whisper of secrets long buried beneath centuries of dust and forgotten knowledge. Kale pulled his threadbare cloak tighter around his shoulders as he navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the Magical Guild's repository, his bare feet silent against the cold stone floors. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows that seemed to mock his every movement, reminding him of his place in this world where omegas were barely tolerated, let alone welcomed. At 23, Kale had learned to make himself invisible, to blend into the background like the countless tomes and scrolls that surrounded him. His pale skin bore the telltale marks of his cursed bloodline, faint silver scars that traced delicate patterns across his forearms, visible only to those who knew what to look for. Most dismissed them as birth defects, but Kale knew better. He was the last of the Celian line, a bloodline that had once stood at the pinnacle of magical society before falling into disgrace and exile. The archive was his sanctuary, the only place where his Omega status didn't matter as much as his ability to coax ancient artifacts into revealing their secrets. He possessed a rare gift that even the most learned scholars envied, the ability to hear the whispers of enchanted objects, to feel their dormant power stirring beneath layers of protective spells. It was a talent that had saved his life more than once, providing him with just enough value to the guild to keep him fed and housed, even if barely. Tonight felt different, though. The air itself seemed to thrum with an energy he couldn't quite identify, and the artifacts around him hummed with an unusual restlessness. Kale paused beside a display case containing a collection of ancient amulets, pressing his palm against the cool glass. The objects within seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, responding to his presence in ways that made his skin tingle with anticipation. The sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor shattered the peaceful silence, followed by voices raised in heated discussion. Kale quickly retreated into the shadows behind a towering bookshelf, his heart racing as he recognized the authoritative tone of Guild Master Aldrich. Visitors to the archive were rare, especially at this hour, and Kale had learned long ago that it was safer to remain unseen when important people conducted their business. "I don't care what your clan traditions dictate," Aldrich was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "The Eternal Flame Key is not some trophy to be claimed by the highest bidder. It's a dangerous artifact that has been sealed away for good reason. And yet you keep it here in this moldering tomb instead of destroying it completely," came the reply, delivered in a voice that sent shivers down Kale's spine. It was deep and resonant, carrying the unmistakable authority of an alpha, but there was something else beneath the surface, a carefully controlled intensity that spoke of barely leashed power. "Perhaps your guild is not as noble as it pretends to be." Kale risked a glance around the edge of the bookshelf and felt his breath catch in his throat. The man facing Guild Master Aldrich was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. His dark hair was pulled back in a practical warrior's knot, and his clothes bore the distinctive leather and fur styling of the northern hunter clans. But it was his eyes that captured Kale's attention, storm gray and sharp as winter steel, scanning the archive with the calculating gaze of a predator. This could only be Rogan, heir to the Northern Hunter clan and one of the most feared alphas in the known territories. Stories of his prowess in battle and his unwavering adherence to the old codes of honor had reached even the isolated archive, though Kale had never expected to see the legendary warrior in person. The alpha's presence filled the space around him like a physical force, making the very air seem to vibrate with contained energy. "The key stays where it is," Aldrich said firmly, though Kale could hear the uncertainty beneath his words. "The binding spells that contain it are too dangerous to disturb. One wrong move could unleash forces that would tear apart the very fabric of reality." Rogan's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Spare me your dramatics, old man. I've seen what happens when ancient powers are left to fester in the dark. They find ways to break free on their own, usually at the worst possible moment. At least if the key is in the hands of someone who understands its true nature, it can be controlled." "And you believe yourself capable of such control?" Aldrich's tone carried a mixture of skepticism and concern. The key was created by the union of three races: werewolf, demon, and omega. It cannot be wielded by any single bloodline without catastrophic consequences. Then perhaps it's time to forge new alliances, Rogan replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The old divisions between our peoples have weakened us all. The demons grow bolder, the Omegas hide in shadows, and the werewolves cling to outdated prejudices. Something must change before we destroy ourselves through stubbornness and pride. Kale's heart pounded as he listened to the exchange, his mind racing with the implications of what he was hearing. The Eternal Flame Key was one of the most legendary artifacts in existence, a relic of the ancient alliance that had once united the three races in common cause. Legends said it could channel the combined power of all three bloodlines, making its wielder nearly invincible. But the same legends warned that attempting to use it without the proper balance would result in madness and destruction. You speak of change, Aldrich said slowly, but I see only the same old hunger for power dressed up in noble intentions. The key will remain sealed, and this conversation is over. I think not, Rogan replied, and Kale heard the subtle threat in his voice. I came here seeking cooperation, but I am prepared to take what I need by force if necessary. The northern hunters have protected these lands for generations, and we will not be denied the tools we need to continue that protection. The tension in the air was palpable, and Kale could feel the magic in the artifacts around him responding to the conflict, their dormant energies stirring like awakening beasts. Without fully understanding what he was doing, he stepped out from behind the bookshelf, his instincts overriding his common sense. Wait, he said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying clearly in the charged atmosphere. Both men turned to look at him, and Kale felt his knees nearly buckle under the weight of their combined attention. Aldrich's face darkened with anger at the interruption, while Rogan's eyes narrowed with calculating interest. Kale, Aldrich said sharply, return to your duties immediately. This discussion does not concern you. But it does, Kale replied, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. You're talking about the Eternal Flame Key as if it's just another weapon to be wielded. But it's so much more than that. It's alive in a way. It has its own will, its own purpose. You can't just take it and expect it to obey you. Rogan took a step closer, and Kale caught his scent. A mixture of pine forest and wild snow that made something deep in his chest tighten with recognition. And how would you know that, Omega? The word was spoken without the usual contempt that most alphas reserved for Kale's kind. But there was still a challenging edge to it. Because I can hear it? Kale said simply, gesturing toward the deeper sections of the archive where the most dangerous artifacts were kept. It's been restless for weeks now, singing in harmonies that haven't been heard for centuries. It's waiting for something or someone, but whoever approaches it needs to understand that it will choose its own master, not the other way around. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the continued drumming of rain against the windows. Aldrich looked like he wanted to drag Kale away and lock him in his chambers, while Rogan studied him with the intensity of a hunter sizing up unfamiliar prey. You can hear the artifacts, Rogan said finally, and it wasn't a question. That's why you're here, isn't it? The guild keeps you around because you can make their dead treasures sing. It's not like that, Kale protested, though he knew there was truth in the Alpha's words. I don't make them do anything. I just listen to what they're already trying to say. Most people can't hear them because they're too focused on what they want the artifacts to do instead of what the artifacts actually need. Enough? Aldrich interrupted, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Kale, you will return to your quarters immediately and speak of this to no one. Lord Rogan, your request has been heard and denied. I suggest you return to your clan before you do something we'll all regret. But Rogan wasn't looking at the guild master anymore. His entire attention was focused on Kale, and there was something in his expression that made Kale's heart race for reasons he didn't fully understand. What's your name, Omega? Kale, he replied, his voice barely audible. Kale of the Celian line. Something shifted in Rogan's expression, a flicker of recognition that was quickly suppressed. The Celian line, he repeated slowly. I thought that bloodline was extinct. Nearly, Kale admitted, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the silver scars on his forearm. I'm the last, as far as anyone knows. The last of a line that once stood at the heart of the ancient alliance. Rogan mused, his eyes never leaving Kale's face. How convenient. There's nothing convenient about it, Aldrich snapped. The Celian line fell into disgrace for good reason. Their corruption nearly destroyed the alliance from within. Kale may have inherited some of their abilities, but he's nothing like his ancestors. Perhaps that's exactly what makes him perfect for this, Rogan said, and there was something almost predatory in his smile. Tell me, Kale of the Celian line, would you be willing to help me retrieve the Eternal Flame Key? The question hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet, and Kale felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He could refuse, could retreat back into the shadows and continue his quiet existence among the dusty tomes and forgotten relics. But something in Rogan's eyes called to him, a recognition that went deeper than mere physical attraction. Though he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward the powerful Alpha. I'll help you, he said quietly, and felt the world shift around him like the turning of a great wheel. But not here, not now. The key isn't just locked away. It's sleeping. Trying to wake it by force would be like trying to rouse a dragon by throwing stones at its head. If you really want to claim it, you'll need to understand what it truly is and what it's been waiting for. Rogan's smile widened, and Kale felt his heart skip a beat. Then we have an agreement. I'll return tomorrow night, and you'll show me where the key is hidden. In return, I'll make sure you're properly compensated for your assistance. This is madness, Aldrich protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I cannot allow one of my archivists to participate in such a dangerous undertaking. Then perhaps it's time for your archivist to seek employment elsewhere, Rogan replied smoothly. I'm sure the Northern Hunter clan could find use for someone with his particular talents. The implication was clear, and Kale felt a thrill of excitement mixed with terror. The offer of protection from one of the most powerful alpha clans in the territory was more than he had ever dared to hope for, but it also meant leaving behind the only life he had ever known. The archive had been his sanctuary, but it had also been his prison, and the thought of freedom was both intoxicating and terrifying. I'll be ready, he said, his voice stronger than he felt, but I have conditions of my own. Rogan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the Omega's boldness. Name them. The key chooses its own master, Kale said firmly. If it rejects you, you'll accept that judgment and leave it where it lies. And if it accepts you, you'll use its power to protect those who cannot protect themselves, not to dominate them. Agreed, Rogan said without hesitation, and Kale felt a surge of respect for the Alpha's quick decision. Though I suspect you underestimate just how dangerous this undertaking will be. The key has been sealed away for good reason, and there are forces in this world that would do anything to prevent its awakening. As if summoned by his words, the temperature in the archive suddenly dropped, and Kale felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The artifacts around them began to hum with agitated energy, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sound of footsteps that seemed to come from no earthly source. We're not alone, he whispered, his gift allowing him to sense the presence of something ancient and powerful moving through the shadows. Something's coming. Rogan's hand moved immediately to the sword at his side, his body tensing with the fluid grace of a warrior prepared for battle. What kind of something? Before Kale could answer, a figure materialized from the darkness at the far end of the corridor, moving with the liquid grace of smoke given form. The newcomer was tall and lean, with features that were almost too perfect to be entirely human. His skin held a subtle luminescence that seemed to emanate from within, and his eyes were the color of molten gold, beautiful and terrible in their alien intensity. My apologies for the intrusion, the figure said, his voice carrying musical tones that seemed to resonate in Kale's bones. I couldn't help but overhear your fascinating conversation about the Eternal Flame Key. Such a coincidence that I should arrive just as you were discussing such matters. Demon? Rogan snarled, his blade clearing its sheath in one smooth motion. You have no business here. On the contrary, the demon replied with a smile that revealed teeth just a shade too sharp to be comfortable. I have every bit as much right to be here as you do, perhaps more. My name is Serial, and I believe we have much to discuss. The name sent a chill down Kale's spine, though he couldn't immediately place why it seemed familiar. There was something about the demon's presence that made the artifacts around them sing with harmonies he had never heard before, complex melodies that spoke of power and temptation in equal measure. The Palace of Dark Covenants has sent an envoy, Aldrich said, his voice heavy with resignation. I should have known this day would come. The balance has been shifting for months, and now all the old powers are stirring. The palace sends no envoys, Serial replied, his golden eyes fixed on Kale with an intensity that made the Omega's skin burn with strange fire. I am here on my own behalf, drawn by rumors of an awakening that could change the very nature of our world. Tell me, young Omega, do you truly believe you can control forces that have slumbered for centuries? I don't want to control anything, Kale said, his voice steady despite the terror and fascination warring in his chest. I just want to understand what the key is trying to tell us. It's been calling out for so long, and no one has been listening. Ah, but I have been listening, Serial said, taking a step closer. I have heard its song in my dreams, felt its power pulling at the very foundations of the underworld. The key is not just a weapon, young one. It is a doorway, a bridge between worlds that have been kept apart for far too long. Stay back, Rogan warned, his blade gleaming in the candlelight. Whatever game you're playing, demon, it ends here. This is no game, Serial replied, though he made no move to come closer. The barriers between our realms are weakening, and soon they will fall entirely. When that happens, only those who understand the true nature of power will survive the chaos that follows. The key could be the salvation of all our peoples, or it could be the instrument of our destruction. The choice lies with those brave enough to seize it. You speak of salvation, Kale said, his scholarly mind grappling with the implications of what he was hearing. But the legends say the key was created to bind the three races together, not to tear down the barriers between worlds. Legends are written by the victors, Serial said with a smile that was equal parts beautiful and terrible. The truth is far more complex. The key was created not to bind, but to liberate. It was meant to free us from the limitations that have kept us weak and divided. But those who feared true unity suppressed its power and spread lies about its purpose. You're lying, Rogan said flatly. The demons have always sought to corrupt and destroy. Why should we trust anything you say? Because, Serial said, his golden eyes shifting to meet the Alpha's gaze. I am not like other demons. I have seen what happens when power is hoarded by the few and denied to the many. I have watched as our peoples grow weaker with each passing generation, our magic fading, our bloodlines thinning. The key offers us a chance to reclaim what we have lost, to become more than we ever were. The passion in his voice was undeniable, and Kale found himself drawn to the demon's words despite every instinct screaming at him to be cautious. There was something about Serial that reminded him of himself, a sense of being caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither but touched by both. You're afraid, Kale said suddenly, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. You're not here because you want power. You're here because you're running from something. Serial's perfect composure cracked for just a moment, and in that instant, Kale saw the truth behind the demon's beautiful facade. He was wounded, not physically but spiritually, carrying scars that cut deeper than any blade. There was pain in his golden eyes, and a loneliness that matched Kale's own. Perceptive, Serial said quietly, his voice losing some of its musical quality. Yes, I am fleeing. The Palace of Dark Covenants has disagreements with my methods. They believe power should be used to dominate and control, while I believe it should be shared and celebrated. Such philosophical differences tend to result in rather permanent consequences. So you're an exile, Rogan said, though his tone had lost some of its hostility. Cast out by your own people for refusing to conform to their expectations. As are you both in your own ways, Serial replied, his gaze moving between the Alpha and the Omega. The werewolf who questions the ancient prejudices of his clan, and the Omega who refuses to accept the limitations others would place upon him. We are all outcasts here, refugees from societies that no longer have room for those who think differently. The truth of his words hung in the air like a challenge, and Kale felt something shift in the dynamic between the three of them. They were not enemies, he realized, but kindred spirits brought together by forces beyond their understanding. Each of them carried wounds inflicted by their own people. Each of them yearned for something more than the narrow confines of their expected roles.
What do you propose?
Kale asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Assuming we could work together, what would you have us do? First, we retrieve the key, Cyril said, his golden eyes gleaming with renewed hope. Then we discover its true purpose, not the lies that have been told about it, but what it was actually meant to accomplish. And finally, we use that knowledge to forge a new alliance between our peoples, one based on mutual respect and shared power rather than fear and domination. It sounds almost too good to be true, Rogan said, though there was interest in his voice. But even if your intentions are genuine, the obstacles we would face are enormous. The Northern Hunters would never accept an alliance with demons, and the demon courts would never trust a werewolf alpha. Which is why we need the Omega, Cyril said, his gaze returning to Kale. The Celian line once stood at the heart of the ancient alliance. They were the mediators, the bridge builders, the ones who could speak to all the peoples and be heard. If anyone can forge a new unity, it would be the last heir of that bloodline. No pressure, Kale muttered, but he could feel the truth of Cyril's words resonating in his bones. The silver scars on his arms tingled with recognition, and the artifacts around them hummed with increasing intensity. Something was awakening, and he was at the center of it whether he wanted to be or not. The hour grows late, Aldrich said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and concern. These matters are too weighty to be decided in haste. Perhaps you should all return to your lodgings and consider carefully what you're proposing to do. Sound advice, Rogan agreed, though his eyes remained fixed on Kale. But the offer stands. Tomorrow night, if you're willing, we'll attempt to reach the key. All of us together or not at all. Agreed, Cyril said with a bow that was both graceful and mocking. Though I suspect tomorrow night will bring more than any of us expect. As the three of them prepared to leave, Kale felt a strange sense of anticipation building in his chest. His quiet life in the archive was over, he knew that much. Whatever happened next, there would be no returning to the shadows and the safety of anonymity. The key was calling to him, and he was finally ready to answer. The next day passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Kale spent the morning researching everything he could find about the Eternal Flame Key, poring over ancient texts and fragmentary accounts of its creation. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that the traditional stories were incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. The key had been forged during the height of the Ancient Alliance, when werewolves, demons, and Omegas had worked together to defend their world against an invasion from the Void Realms. It was said to contain the combined essence of all three races, their strengths and their weaknesses bound together in perfect harmony. But the accounts differed wildly on what had happened after the war ended. Some sources claimed the key had been hidden away to prevent any one race from dominating the others. Others suggested it had been deliberately destroyed to prevent its misuse. But a few fragmentary references hinted at a third possibility, that the key had been sealed not to prevent its use, but to wait for the right moment to reveal its true purpose. As the afternoon wore on, Kale found himself growing increasingly restless. The artifacts throughout the archive seemed to be responding to his agitation, their dormant energies stirring and intertwining in patterns he had never seen before. By evening, the very air seemed to crackle with potential, and he could feel the key's presence like a beacon in the darkness. Rogan arrived first, slipping into the archive like a shadow despite his size. He had traded his formal clan attire for practical leather and steel, the gear of a warrior preparing for battle. His storm-gray eyes found Kale immediately, and there was something in his expression that made the Omega's heart race. "Are you ready for this?" the Alpha asked, his voice low and intense. "Once we cross this threshold, there's no going back." The key will either accept us or destroy us, and there are no guarantees which it will choose. I'm as ready as I'll ever be, Kale replied, though his hands trembled slightly as he gathered his research materials. The texts suggest that the key responds to intent as much as bloodline. If we approach it with pure hearts and genuine purpose, it should recognize us as worthy. And if we don't? Rogan asked with a wry smile. What happens to those who approach it with impure hearts? The accounts are vague on that point, Kale admitted, but they generally involve words like incineration and soul-searing agony, so I'd recommend we avoid finding out firsthand. Siriel materialized from the shadows with his characteristic fluid grace, and Kale felt his breath catch at the sight of the demon. In the soft candlelight, Siriel's otherworldly beauty was even more pronounced, his golden eyes seeming to hold depths that mortal minds could barely comprehend. But there was something different about him tonight, a tension in his perfect features that spoke of inner conflict. Second thoughts? Rogan asked, apparently noticing the same thing. Always, Siriel replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But fear and doubt are luxuries I can no longer afford. The forces that hunt me grow stronger with each passing day, and soon they will find me no matter where I hide. The key represents my only chance at freedom, and I will not let that chance slip away. What forces? Kale asked, concerned by the pain he could hear beneath the demon's words. What exactly are you running from? Siriel was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes distant with memory. The Palace of Dark Covenants is ruled by beings who believe that power exists to be wielded over others. They see the mortal realms as playthings to be manipulated for their amusement, and they view compassion as weakness. I made the mistake of disagreeing with their philosophy, and now they consider me a traitor to my own kind. What did you do? Rogan asked, his voice carrying a note of respect that surprised Kale. I helped a group of mortal children escape from a demon lord who was using them in his experiments, Siriel said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. But apparently, showing mercy to mortals is considered a capital offense in the current political climate. The simple honesty of his words struck Kale like a physical blow. Here was a demon who had risked everything to protect innocent children, who had chosen exile over complicity in cruelty. The contrast with the stories he had been told about demonic nature was so stark that it forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about the divisions between their races. You're not what I expected, Kale said quietly, and Siriel's golden eyes sharpened with interest. And what did you expect? The demon asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Someone cruel and manipulative, Kale admitted. Someone who would use their power to take whatever they wanted without regard for the consequences. But you're not like that at all, are you? I try not to be, Siriel replied, his voice soft with something that might have been hope, though I fear that years of hiding and running may have damaged me more than I care to admit. It's difficult to maintain one's humanity when the world seems determined to strip it away. Then perhaps it's time to stop running, Rogan said, his tone carrying the authority of command. The northern hunters have always stood against those who would prey upon the innocent. If you're truly committed to protecting others, you'll find no enemies among my people. A werewolf alpha offering sanctuary to a demon, Siriel mused, and there was wonder in his voice. The world truly is changing, isn't it? It has to, Kale said, surprising himself with the conviction in his words. The old ways of thinking, the old divisions and prejudices, they're not serving anyone anymore. Maybe it's time to build something new, something better. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts, before Rogan finally spoke. The key is waiting, he said. Are we ready to face whatever judgment it renders? Kale nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation and terror in equal measure. The vault is this way, he said, leading them deeper into the archive than he had ever gone before. Fair warning. The protective wards around the key are designed to test more than just our ability to bypass them. They'll probe our minds, our hearts, our very souls. If any of us harbors secret darkness or hidden agendas, the wards will know. Then we'd better make sure we're all being honest with each other, Siriel said, his golden eyes meeting Kale's with startling intensity. No secrets, no hidden motives. If we're going to do this, we do it as equals with complete trust. Agreed, Rogan said, though there was something in his voice that suggested he was struggling with his own internal conflicts. Though I should warn you both that my clan will consider what we're doing tonight an act of heresy. If we succeed, I may find myself as exiled as you are, demon. My name is Serial, the demon replied with a slight smile. And if we succeed, perhaps exile from those who would divide us is not such a terrible fate. They descended into the depths of the archive, moving through corridors that grew progressively older and more elaborate as they penetrated deeper into the mountain. The stone walls were carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change in the flickering torchlight, and the air itself grew thick with the weight of accumulated magic. Kale led them through a series of increasingly complex security measures, each one designed to deter all but the most determined seekers. There were walls of pure energy that had to be negotiated with careful spellwork, guardians made of crystallized starlight that tested their resolve, and riddles that could only be solved by those who understood the true nature of the alliance the key represented. But it was the final barrier that proved the most challenging. They stood before a door of black metal inscribed with runes that hurt to look at directly, and Kale could feel the key's presence burning like a star beyond the threshold. The door had no handle, no visible mechanism for opening, just a series of hand-shaped impressions in the metal surface. It requires all three bloodlines to open, Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper. The werewolf, the demon, and the Omega must all give their consent before the door will yield. Then let's get this over with, Rogan said, placing his hand over one of the impressions. The metal immediately began to glow with silver light, and Kale could feel the Alpha's power flowing into the ancient mechanisms. Serial placed his hand over the second impression, and golden fire erupted from the metal, intertwining with the silver light in patterns that spoke of harmony and balance. The demon's power was different from Rogan's, more fluid and intuitive, but no less strong. Kale approached the final impression with trembling hands, knowing that this moment would define the rest of his life. The metal was warm under his palm, and as his power flowed into the door, crimson light joined the silver and gold, completing a pattern that had been broken for centuries. The door swung open with a sound like singing crystal, revealing a chamber that defied the laws of physics. The space beyond was far larger than the mountain could possibly contain, its walls seeming to stretch into infinity. At the center of the chamber, floating in a column of pure light, was the eternal flame key itself. It was beautiful and terrible, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain an entire universe within its faceted surface. Stars burned in its depths, and galaxies spiraled through its core, while on its surface, symbols from all three races danced in patterns too complex for mortal minds to fully comprehend. It's magnificent, Serial breathed, his golden eyes wide with wonder. I can feel its power from here, calling to something deep within my soul. It's calling to all of us, Kale said, his voice thick with emotion. But it's also afraid. It's been alone for so long, waiting for someone to understand what it truly is. And what is it? Rogan asked, his storm-gray eyes never leaving the key's luminous form. It's not a weapon, Kale said, the truth hitting him like a revelation. It's a bridge, a living connection between all the races, all the realms. It was never meant to be used by one person or one people. It was meant to be shared, to bind us together in ways that transcend our physical forms. As if responding to his words, the key pulsed with increased intensity, and the light around it began to shift and change. Images appeared in the radiance, scenes from the ancient past when the three races had worked together in perfect harmony. Werewolves and demons fighting side by side, Omegas serving as mediators and healers, all of them united in common cause. The alliance wasn't destroyed by war, Kale continued, his understanding deepening with each pulse of the key's light. It was destroyed by fear. Fear of what we could become if we truly united, fear of losing individual identity in the face of collective power. So the key was hidden away, and the races drifted apart, each one diminished by the loss of the others. But now it's calling us back, Cyril said, his voice filled with hope. It's offering us a chance to reclaim what was lost, to become whole again. The question is, Rogan said slowly, are we brave enough to accept what it's offering? True unity means giving up the illusion of separateness, of being superior to or different from the others. It means accepting that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. I'm willing, Kale said without hesitation. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was caught between worlds. If the key can help me find my true place, I'll take that chance. As am I, Cyril added, his golden eyes shining with determination. I've seen what happens when power is hoarded and misused. If there's a chance to create something better, something based on love and mutual respect rather than fear and domination, I want to be part of it. Then we're all in agreement, Rogan said, his voice carrying the weight of command. But I need to know what happens when we claim the key. What changes, and what stays the same? I don't know, Kale admitted. The texts are unclear about the specifics. But I think it will awaken something in each of us, something that's been sleeping since the alliance fell. We'll still be ourselves, but we'll also be more than ourselves. More how? Cyril asked, curiosity and concern warring in his expression. Connected, Kale said, the word coming to him with the force of prophecy. We'll be able to feel each other's emotions, share each other's thoughts, understand each other in ways that go beyond words. It won't be a loss of individuality, but a multiplication of it. A bond, Rogan said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Kale's heart race, like the mate bonds of legend, but deeper and more complex. Exactly, Kale whispered, his eyes meeting the alphas with sudden understanding. The key doesn't just unite the races, it unites the individuals who claim it. We would be bound together in ways that transcend physical form, spiritual companions as well as allies. And you're both willing to accept such a bond? Cyril asked, his golden eyes moving between them with careful attention. It would mean giving up the possibility of finding mates within your own species, of living conventional lives. I've never wanted a conventional life, Kale said, his voice growing stronger with each word. And I've never felt the kind of connection with anyone that I feel with both of you. If the key can deepen that connection, make it something permanent and unbreakable, I want that more than anything. As do I, Rogan said, his storm-gray eyes never leaving Kale's face. I've spent my whole life following the expectations of others, conforming to the narrow definitions of what an alpha should be. But when I look at you, Omega, I see something that makes me want to be more than just a warrior or a leader. I see someone who could help me become the person I was meant to be. And I see two souls who complement each other perfectly, Cyril added, his voice soft with emotion. The strength of the Alpha, the wisdom of the Omega, and perhaps the passion of the demon to bind them together. We could be something unprecedented, something that transcends the limitations of our individual natures. The key pulsed again, and this time the light that surrounded it reached out to touch each of them, wrapping around their bodies like liquid starlight. Kale felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it, the missing piece of his soul that would make him whole. Together, then, he said, extending his hands toward his companions. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. Rogan and Cyril each took one of his hands, and the moment their skin touched, Kale felt a surge of power that threatened to overwhelm his senses. He could feel Rogan's strength flowing into him, the Alpha's fierce protective instincts and unwavering loyalty. At the same time, Cyril's passion and compassion filled the spaces in his heart he hadn't known were empty, bringing warmth and light to corners of his soul that had been cold and dark for too long. The key responded to their connection, its light growing brighter and more intense until it filled the entire chamber. The crystalline structure began to sing, a harmony of voices that spoke of unity and love, of power shared rather than hoarded, of a future where the divisions between races and individuals could be healed. As the light reached its peak, Kale felt something fundamental shift inside him. The silver scars on his arms began to glow with their own inner fire, and he could feel his Omega nature awakening in ways he had never imagined possible. But it wasn't the weak, submissive Omega nature that society had tried to force upon him. This was something far more powerful and complex, a force that could heal and unite, that could bridge the gaps between different forms of existence. At the same time, he could feel changes occurring in his companions. Rogan's alpha nature was expanding, becoming something that could protect and nurture rather than simply dominate. The werewolf's connection to the wild was deepening, but it was becoming a force for harmony rather than conquest. And Serial's demon heritage was transforming from a source of shame and exile into a wellspring of creative power, his ability to influence and inspire others becoming a tool for healing rather than manipulation. "It's working," Kale breathed, his voice filled with wonder. "I can feel it, the bond forming between us. We're becoming something new, something that's never existed before." "A triad," Rogan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Bound by love and power, united in purpose and spirit. I can feel your thoughts, Kale, your hopes and dreams. And yours too, Serial. We are three minds sharing one heart. And one destiny," Serial added, tears of joy streaming down his perfect features. "I never thought I would find acceptance, let alone love. But here, with both of you, I feel complete for the first time in my existence." The Keys song reached a crescendo, and suddenly the crystalline structure dissolved into pure energy, flowing into the three of them like liquid lightning. Kale felt the artifact's power settling into his bones, becoming part of his very essence. But it wasn't his power alone. It belonged to all three of them equally, a shared resource that would bind them together for eternity. As the light faded and the chamber returned to its normal state, Kale found himself standing between his two companions, their hands still linked, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. The bond between them was complete, an unbreakable connection that would allow them to share thoughts, emotions, and experiences as if they were one being with three bodies. "So what happens now?" Rogan asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "We have the key's power, but what do we do with it?" "We fulfill its purpose," Kale said, the answer coming to him with crystal clarity. "We use it to heal the divisions between the races, to show them that unity is possible, that love can overcome fear and prejudice. We become the bridge that the key was always meant to be. And we face the consequences of our choice," Serial added, his golden eyes serious despite the joy in his voice. "There will be those who see what we've become as an abomination, who will try to destroy us to preserve the old ways. Are we prepared for that? Together, we can face anything," Rogan said with quiet confidence. "The northern hunters may exile me, the demon courts may hunt you, and the Omega colonies may reject Kale, but we have each other. That's worth any sacrifice." "More than worth it," Kale agreed, his heart full of a love so deep and complete that it threatened to overwhelm him. "I found my family, my destiny, my home. Everything else is just details." They made their way out of the chamber and back through the archive, their movements synchronized in ways that spoke of their new connection. The world around them looked different now, charged with possibilities that had been invisible before. Kale could feel the hopes and dreams of every person they passed, could sense the hidden connections that bound all living things together. "The world is about to change," he said as they emerged into the cool night air. "Can you feel it? The barriers between the races are already starting to weaken. Our bond is just the beginning." "Then we'd better be ready," Rogan said, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. "Change is never easy, and there will be those who resist it with everything they have." "Let them try," Serial said, his voice carrying a note of steel that hadn't been there before. "We have something they don't understand, something they can't fight. We have love, and love is the strongest force in any universe." As they walked away from the archive, Kale felt a sense of completeness that he had never experienced before. The lonely Omega who had spent his life hiding in the shadows was gone, replaced by something far more complex and powerful. He was still himself, but he was also more than himself, part of a triad that could change the world. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and dangers that none of them could fully anticipate. But they would face those challenges together, bound by a love that transcended the boundaries of race and species, united in a purpose that would reshape the very foundations of their world. Behind them, the archive stood silent and empty, its greatest treasure now living and breathing in the hearts of three unlikely companions. The Eternal Flame Key had found its true purpose at last, not as a weapon or a tool of domination, but as a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope that love could indeed conquer all. The weeks that followed their bonding were a time of adjustment and discovery. Kale found himself struggling to process the constant flow of emotions and thoughts from his companions, the bond between them sometimes threatening to overwhelm his already sensitive nature. But gradually, he learned to manage the connection, to find balance between his own identity and the shared consciousness they had created. Rogan faced his own challenges as word of his alliance with a demon and an Omega reached the Northern Hunter clan. The werewolf Alpha was summoned before the clan council to explain his actions, and the confrontation was every bit as difficult as he had expected. His people could not understand how he could bond with beings they considered inferior and corrupted, and many called for his exile or execution. But Rogan stood firm in his convictions, using the key's power to project his genuine love and respect for his companions. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the clan began to see past their prejudices, recognizing the strength and nobility in the bond he had formed. It was not a complete victory, but it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of ancient hatred that had divided their peoples for so long. Cyriel's situation was more precarious, as the forces of the Palace of Dark Covenants continued to hunt him with increasing desperation. The demon lords could sense the change in his nature, the way the key's power had transformed him from an exile into something far more dangerous to their rule. They sent assassins and corruption spirits to eliminate him, but the bond he shared with Kale and Rogan made him far stronger than they had anticipated. The first real test of their unity came when a delegation from the palace finally tracked them down to the small settlement they had established in the borderlands. The demons came in force, led by a lord of the Seventh Circle who commanded powers that could shatter mountains and boil seas. They demanded Cyriel's surrender, threatening to destroy everything and everyone he had come to care about if he refused. But instead of facing the demons alone, Cyriel stood with his bonded companions, their combined power creating a barrier of light that the darkness could not penetrate. The battle that followed was brief but decisive, as the key's influence spread through the demon forces, awakening in them the same capacity for love and compassion that had transformed Cyriel. "You offer us corruption disguised as salvation," the demon lord snarled, his form writhing with barely contained rage. "These bonds you have formed are unnatural perversions of our true nature." "Our true nature is to connect," Kale replied, his voice carrying the authority of absolute conviction. "To love and be loved, to find strength in unity rather than domination. What you call corruption, we call healing." "You would make us weak," the demon lord accused, but there was uncertainty in his voice now, doubt creeping into his perfect certainty. "We would make you whole," Cyriel said, stepping forward with his hands empty of weapons. "I was once like you, believing that power existed only to be wielded over others. But I have learned that true power comes from lifting others up, from finding strength in diversity rather than uniformity." The demon lord's resistance crumbled as he felt the love that flowed between the three bonded companions, the way their individual strengths complemented and enhanced each other. One by one, his followers began to question the teachings they had accepted without thought, seeing for the first time the poverty of a philosophy based on fear and domination. "This is not over," the demon lord said as he retreated, but his words lacked conviction. "The palace will not tolerate this heresy." "Then perhaps it's time for the palace to change," Rogan said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. "The old ways are dying, and the new world belongs to those who can embrace love over fear." As the demon forces withdrew, Kale felt a surge of hope that went beyond his personal happiness. The bond they had created was spreading, touching the lives of everyone they encountered, offering them a glimpse of what was possible when differences were celebrated rather than feared. They were becoming the catalyst for a transformation that would reshape their entire world. The changes in Kale himself were perhaps the most dramatic of all. The Omega nature that had once been a source of shame and limitation was revealed as something far more complex and powerful. He could feel the pain and loneliness of every person he met, but more importantly, he could offer them healing and hope. His gift for communicating with artifacts had evolved into something far more profound, the ability to hear the deepest needs and desires of every living soul. It was during this time that Kale began to experience the first stirrings of what would become his most profound transformation. The bond with his companions had awakened something in his biology, a change that went beyond the mental and emotional to touch the very core of his physical being. He began to experience symptoms that were unlike anything described in the traditional texts about Omega physiology. The first sign was a sweetening of his scent, a change so subtle that only Rogan and Serial noticed it at first. But as the days passed, the alteration became more pronounced, carrying undertones that spoke of new life and unprecedented possibilities. Kale found himself growing more sensitive to touch and emotion, his body responding to his companion's presence in ways that made him blush with embarrassment and wonder. "Something's changing," he told them one evening as they sat around the fire in their modest dwelling. "I can feel it in my bones, in my blood. The bond is doing something to me, transforming me in ways I don't understand." "We can feel it too," Rogan said, his storm-gray eyes dark with concern and something deeper. "Your scent, your energy, everything about you is shifting. It's beautiful, but also intense. It's like you're becoming more yourself," Serial added, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "More Omega, but also more than Omega. Something new and wonderful." Kale nodded, his hands moving unconsciously to his abdomen. I think I'm going to have a child. Not just any child, but something that's never existed before. A child born from the bond between all three of us, carrying the essence of werewolf, demon, and Omega in perfect harmony." The revelation hit his companions like a physical blow, and for a moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. Then Rogan was beside him, his strong hands gentle as they touched Kale's face, his eyes blazing with a mixture of joy and protective fury. "A child," the Alpha breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child. I never dared to hope." "Are you certain?" Serial asked, moving to kneel beside them, his perfect features soft with wonder. "The union of three bloodlines has never been attempted before. We don't know what to expect." "I'm certain," Kale said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. "I can feel the life growing inside me, can sense its incredible potential. It's not just a child, it's a symbol, a living proof that love can transcend every boundary, every division." "And a target," Rogan said grimly, his protective instincts already flaring to life. "When word of this spreads, every faction that opposes change will see the child as a threat to be eliminated." "Then we protect it," Serial said with quiet determination. "We find a safe place, away from the politics and prejudices of the outside world. We give our child a chance to grow and develop in peace." The decision to go into hiding was not made lightly, but it was necessary. The three companions withdrew to a remote mountain sanctuary, a place where ancient magic still flowed freely and the barriers between worlds were thin. There, surrounded by the beauty of untouched wilderness, they waited for the miracle that was growing within Kale. The pregnancy progressed unlike anything recorded in medical texts. Kale's body adapted to carry a child that was part werewolf, part demon, and part Omega, each aspect of its heritage manifesting in different ways. Sometimes he could feel the child's werewolf nature, strong and wild, demanding space and freedom. Other times, the demon heritage dominated, filling him with otherworldly energy and visions of realms beyond mortal comprehension. But it was the Omega aspects that proved most challenging. The child seemed to amplify Kale's natural empathic abilities, making him acutely sensitive to the emotions and needs of every living thing around him. He could feel the pain of injured animals, the loneliness of isolated plants, the joy of birds in flight. It was overwhelming at times, but also profoundly beautiful, connecting him to the web of life in ways he had never imagined possible. Rogan and Serial cared for him with a devotion that bordered on worship, their every action guided by love and protective instinct. The alpha hunted and gathered food, ensuring that Kale had everything he needed to nourish the growing child. The demon used his powers to weave protective spells around their sanctuary, creating barriers that would keep hostile forces at bay. But more than that, they provided emotional support and companionship during the long months of waiting. The bond between them had deepened with each passing day, becoming something that transcended physical form. They were no longer three separate individuals who happened to love each other. They were facets of a single, complex being, each one essential to the whole. "I can feel the child's thoughts sometimes," Kale told them one evening as they sat beneath the stars. "It's aware even before birth. It knows about the bond between us, understands that it's the product of something unprecedented." "What does it feel like?" Serial asked, his golden eyes bright with curiosity. "Can you sense its personality? Its nature?" "It's balanced," Kale said slowly, searching for the right words. "Strong like Rogan, passionate like you, but also gentle and wise. It will be everything we are, but also something entirely new. A bridge between worlds, just like the key intended. And it will need all of us," Rogan added, his voice soft with wonder. "Not just one father, but three. A family that transcends traditional definitions. The first of its kind," Serial said, "but hopefully not the last. If we can prove that such bonds are possible, that love can create new forms of life and connection, perhaps others will follow our example." The birth itself was unlike anything any of them had experienced. It began at dawn on the summer solstice, when the barriers between worlds were at their thinnest. Kale felt the first contractions as waves of energy that seemed to pulse in harmony with the rising sun, and he knew that the child was ready to enter the world. The labor was intense but surprisingly brief, as if the child was eager to be born. Rogan and Serial supported Kale through every moment, their love and strength flowing into him through the bond they shared. And when the child finally emerged, it was with a flash of light that illuminated the entire sanctuary. The baby was perfect, a healthy boy with features that blended all three of his parents' heritages. He had Rogan's strong bone structure and Serial's otherworldly beauty, but his eyes were pure omega, deep and wise beyond his years. Most remarkably, he bore the same silver scars that marked Kale's arms, though in the child they formed patterns that seemed to shift and change like living tattoos. "He's beautiful," Rogan breathed, his voice choked with emotion as he held his son for the first time. "Perfect in every way. Look at his aura," Serial said in wonder. "I can see all three bloodlines intertwined, but also something else. Something that's purely his own." "He's the future," Kale said, his heart overflowing with love as he watched his bonded companions cradling their child. "The first of a new generation that will know no boundaries, no artificial divisions. Through him, the three races will become one." They named the child Lyrian, meaning song of harmony, in the ancient tongue. From his first breath, he seemed to embody the unity his parents had fought to create. He responded equally to all three fathers, his infant mind already reaching out through the bond to connect with their thoughts and emotions. As the weeks passed, it became clear that Lyrian was indeed something unprecedented. He aged more quickly than normal children, his development accelerated by the magical forces that had shaped his creation. By his first month, he was already showing signs of advanced intelligence and awareness. By his third month, he was beginning to manifest abilities that drew from all three bloodlines. "He's going to be powerful," Rogan observed one evening as they watched Lyrian practice moving small objects with his mind. "More powerful than any of us, I think. But also more balanced," Kale added, his omega instincts allowing him to sense the child's emotional state. "He has access to powers from all three races, but he also has the wisdom to use them responsibly. He'll never know the kind of prejudice and division that shaped us. He'll be the bridge we always hoped to build," Serial said, his golden eyes soft with paternal pride. "Living proof that love can overcome any obstacle, create any miracle." The peaceful months in their mountain sanctuary came to an end when scouts from the outside world finally tracked them down. Word of the Omega who had bonded with a werewolf alpha and a demon had spread throughout the realms, and now delegations from all three races were demanding to see the child that had resulted from their union. The first to arrive were representatives from the Northern Hunter clan, led by Rogan's own father. The elder alpha was a formidable figure, his presence commanding respect and fear in equal measure. But when he saw his son's happiness, when he felt the love that flowed between the three bonded companions, his hostility began to crumble. "This is not what I expected," he admitted, his storm-gray eyes, so like his son's, studying Lyrian with fascination. "The child is remarkable. I can feel the power in him, but also the gentleness. He has the strength of our people, but none of the rage. He has the best of all three bloodlines," Rogan said proudly. "And he has something more, the knowledge that he is loved absolutely, without condition or reservation. That makes all the difference." The demon delegation arrived next, led by a lord of the inner circle who had come to investigate the rumors of Cyriel's transformation. But like the werewolf elder, he found his preconceptions challenged by the reality of what he witnessed. The love between the three fathers was undeniable, and the child they had created was clearly something special. "You have achieved something we thought impossible," the demon lord said, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. "You have found a way to unite our peoples without destroying what makes each of us unique. This child could be the key to ending the ancient conflicts that have weakened us all." The Omega delegation was the last to arrive, and their reaction was perhaps the most complex. They saw in Kale someone who had transcended the limitations that society had placed upon their kind, who had found strength and power in his nature rather than shame and subordination. But they also saw challenges to their own understanding of what it meant to be Omega. "You have broken every rule," their leader said, but there was wonder in her voice rather than condemnation. "You have shown us that we are not weak, not inferior, not destined to serve others. You have shown us that we can be equal partners in love and power." "That was always the truth," Kale replied gently. "I just found the courage to embrace it, with the help of those who loved me enough to see past the lies we were all told about our natures." The gathering of the three delegations marked a turning point in the history of their world. For the first time in centuries, representatives from all three races stood together in peace, united by their shared wonder at the miracle of Lyrian's existence. The child himself seemed to understand the significance of the moment, his infant mind already reaching out to touch the hearts and minds of all present. But the most profound change was yet to come. As Lyrian grew and developed, his unique nature began to affect everyone around him. His presence seemed to dissolve the artificial barriers that had kept the races apart, allowing them to see each other as individuals rather than representatives of ancient stereotypes. Werewolves found themselves drawn to demon philosophy and Omega wisdom. Demons discovered the honor and loyalty that defined werewolf culture. Omegas learned to embrace their own power and strength. The rigid hierarchies that had defined their societies for millennia began to crumble, replaced by more fluid and inclusive structures. "He's changing the world just by existing," Kale observed one evening as they watched delegations from all three races working together to plan a new form of government. "Not through conquest or manipulation, but through love and understanding. It's what the key always intended," Rogan said, his arm around his bonded mate's shoulders. "Unity through diversity, strength through connection. We were just the catalysts. Lyrian is the fulfillment of that vision." "And he's not alone," Cyriel added, his golden eyes bright with hope. "Other children are being born, other bonds are being formed. The future belongs to those who can love without boundaries." As the years passed, their family grew not just in numbers but in influence. Lyrian was joined by other children, each one unique but all sharing the same essential nature, the ability to bridge differences, to find common ground where others saw only division. They became the foundation of a new society, one where love and understanding triumphed over fear and prejudice. Kale, Rogan, and Cyriel aged gracefully, their bond deepening with each passing year. They had faced challenges that would have destroyed lesser relationships, but their love had only grown stronger. They had become living proof that the greatest power in any universe was the decision to love without reservation, to accept differences without judgment, to build bridges where others built walls. The archive where their story began was transformed into a school where children from all three races learned together, their differences celebrated rather than feared. The Eternal Flame Key's power flowed through the institution, ensuring that the lessons of unity and love would be passed down to future generations. And in the quiet moments between public appearances and official duties, the three fathers would sit together and watch their children play, their hearts full of gratitude for the miracle that had brought them together. They had begun as outcasts and exiles, but they had become the architects of a new world order based on love and acceptance. "Do you ever regret it?" Kale asked one evening as they sat beneath the stars, their children sleeping peacefully nearby. "Giving up the lives we might have had for this one?" "Never," Rogan said without hesitation. "This is the life I was meant to live, the love I was meant to find. Everything else was just preparation for this moment." "The greatest treasures are often disguised as the greatest risks," Cyril added, his golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "We took a chance on love, and it transformed not just our lives but the entire world. Then we succeeded," Kale said simply, his heart full of contentment. "We found what we were looking for, even though we didn't know what it was when we began searching. We found home, family, purpose, everything that makes life worth living." Their story had become legend, told and retold throughout the realms as an example of what was possible when love conquered fear. The Omega who had been rejected by his own people, the Alpha who had questioned ancient traditions, and the demon who had chosen compassion over cruelty, together, they had changed the world. But more than that, they had found happiness. In a universe where love was often seen as weakness, they had proven it was the strongest force of all. They had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And in doing so, they had fulfilled the deepest purpose of any life, to love and be loved in return, without condition or reservation. The Eternal Flame Key had found its true purpose at last, not as a weapon or a tool of conquest, but as a symbol of unity and hope. And in the hearts of three unlikely lovers, it had kindled a flame that would burn bright for all eternity.